These are Jesus' words to the church at Thyatira. To the angel of the church in Thyatira write, These are the words of the Son of God, whose eyes are like blazing fire and whose feet are like burnished bronze. I know your deeds, your love and faith, your service and perseverance, and that you are now doing more than you did at first. Nevertheless, I have these things against you. You tolerate that woman Jezebel, who calls herself a prophet. By her teaching, she misleads my servants into sexual immorality and the eating of food sacrificed to idols. I have given her time to repent of her immorality, but she is unwilling. So I will cast her on a bed of suffering, and I will make those who commit adultery with her suffer intensely unless they repent of her ways. I will strike her children dead. Then all the churches will know that I am he who searches hearts and minds, and I will repay each of you according to your deeds. Now I say to the rest of you in Thyatira, to you who do not hold to her teaching and have not learned Satan's so-called deep secrets, I will not impose any other burden on you except to hold onto what you have until I come. To the one who is victorious and does my will to the end, I will give authority over the nations. That one will rule them with an iron scepter and will dash them to pieces like pottery, just as I have received authority from my Father. I will also give that one the morning star. Whoever has ears, let them hear what the Spirit says to the churches.
So now we're in the city of Thyatira as we continue our 7 churches tour.
And this city is interesting because Jesus calls himself Son of God. Well, this is a city that was basically just filled with common type people. And it was dedicated to Apollo, which was the son of Zeus, and he was called the Son of God. So it's quite interesting when you look at how Jesus is consistently using the historical context to reveal something about himself, but also showing that he knows something about the city.
One thing in the city is that it was controlled by common workers, blue collar workers who were involved in the textile industry, the different guilds that were available. So the guilds may be described as like a union or a sorority or a fraternity, because it would include both the business side of things with the finances and the money and the skills, but it would also include parties and participation in parties, which would include visiting the temple, being involved in various spiritual, physical activities with eating and drinking and being merry in that sense.
So it basically said the guilds would form your entire community. So it was your community, it was your relationships, it was your job, it was your religion, it was the economics, it was everything. And Apollo was the patron of the unions or of these guilds. And so the pressure that the Christians were under is this: if they decided that they were going to become followers of Jesus, then they were having to make really hard decisions. They were having to decide, would they truly believe in Jesus and follow him? And if so, could they party? Could they fellowship? Could they have community just like they had before? Now you have to understand that in many of these parties and fellowships, they would be held at Apollo's temple or Apollo's place. And it would include idol worship, and it would include food that was
sacrifice to idols.
It would include temple prostitution. It would include sexual immorality. So of course the Christians would say, well, not of course, but they would choose to say, no, we can't still do that. And so what would happen is that would make people in the guilds nervous, that Apollo would be upset, and it would affect the success of the guild, and so they would kick those Christians out.
So then if you're not participating with your community guild, then you're going to cause a spiritual curse on your guild or difficulties with your guild. So are you part of the community? Are you not part of the community?
And if you chose that you were not, then you would be ostracized. Plus it would be hard for you then to set up another shop somewhere else, because people wouldn't want to purchase from someone that had broken union with the guild. So under intense social pressure, there are these Christians. And in the midst of all of that pressure that they were facing, Jesus said that he knows and he commends those Christians who were choosing him over their jobs and the economy and their social status that they were losing because of claiming his name.
It's good that he knows the good things, because sometimes we think God has a camera watching my every move, my every thought, my every action, but he also sees the good things that we do, the perseverance, the good choices. When you make solid choices, when you make loving actions to your family or to your friends, your coworkers, Jesus sees those positive things and remembers them and knows them just as well as he knows every bad thing that we do.
Now, this city was also known for the different, as we said, the guilds, but I want to tell you about some of the industries that they had. They were known for the bronze making that they made here, and they would shine the bronze so that it would be like their style of mirrors. They also were known, famous around the world for their silver. They had great silversmiths here. They also were known for textiles, and because of the minerals in the water here, there was a rich purple or red color that they were able to create with the dye. You remember the story of Lydia, who is the first follower of Jesus out of Europe.
From Acts chapter 16.
Lydia was from Thyatira, and she was a dealer in the purple cloth. So these different types of industries would bring economics into the city. Well, you notice how Jesus talks about himself at the beginning of this, and he says that he has eyes like blazing fire, and he has feet like bronze. So what do we learn? What is Jesus trying to tell us about by understanding the cultural context here? One, when you think about blazing eyes like fire, we think of all of the ways that they would burn the silver or the bronze, the heat, the intense heat. But I think what Jesus is trying to say with his blazing eyes of fire is he's able to see deep into each person, deep into the city to understand what is really going on.
And he also purifies it, because fire, what does it do? It burns away the dross. It burns away the part that's not going to last forever, and separates. So the blazing eyes of fire separate the things that are eternal from the things that are temporary. And so Jesus is saying, my eyes are burning through, and you've done a good job. I see that you have done many good things here. Yet he has one thing against them.
Well, and before we talk about what he has against them, his feet are like bronze. What is he trying to say about that? Well, when you think of bronze, you think of something that is sturdy and that is unwavering, and it is strong, it's heavy. And so Jesus is saying, look, my feet, they are unwavering. And so what is he trying to say to the early believers? I'm strong enough. So in the midst of you feeling like you're wavering because you're losing your job, you're losing your status, you're losing your community, when you're pushed out, when you are ostracized, hold on to me, because he says, I'm unwavering, I'm strong, I am sturdy. It doesn't look like it with everything that's going on, but Jesus is letting them know his character and what they can trust.
So what does he have against them?
So, first, what he has for them, he has many good things to say. He basically is saying, I know the pressures that you're under, but these are the things that I notice about you. I notice that you have great deeds, you have great love, you have incredible perseverance, you have faith, and you have service. And then he adds, and you actually have deeds that are greater than you did at the first. So what we see in this is that there are believers that are growing in their faith because they're doing more and more as they're getting to know Jesus more, trusting Jesus more. Though they're ostracized, they're continuing to do more and more deeds in spite of their poverty. But Jesus has something to say against the church of Thyatira, and he says that there are some in their midst that tolerate Jezebel. Why don't you explain a little bit about Jezebel?
Jezebel comes from the wife of Ahab. Her family, her father was one of the priests in Sidon and Tyre up in the Lebanon area. They were worshipers of Baal. Ithbaal, her dad, was a priest of Baal. She's named Jezebel. So Baal or Baal was the name of the god who received the sacrifice of babies. So Molech and Baal were the two of the main. Chemosh was another one who would receive baby sacrifices in the name of Baal. So Jezebel would be the one who would then open up that type of immorality. And what leads to the babies is the immorality that would be resulting in babies being produced, which would then sacrifice to Baal. So it's both the child sacrifice and the sexual immorality that we see in the name Jezebel.
And so why Jesus gets upset is he says that there's some within the church that are doing good deeds, they're tolerating Jezebel. And then it goes on in the research that we were able to find that there was a Jewish, what would they call her, a prophetess? Priestess. And her name was, can you pronounce it? Sambata, whatever, we don't not really sure how to pronounce it. And she was encouraging people, and it might, when Jesus says Jezebel, he might have been referring to this priestess that was encouraging people to say, you know what, you can be a Christian, but you can also do these other things. You can still go to the Apollo's parties.
Because we have secret knowledge, we have deep things you can learn.
And so what Jesus calls that is he calls it the deep teachings of Satan. And he's like, I don't agree with this. You cannot do this. You cannot take the deep secrets of Satan is actually disillusionment, and it's anti-Jesus, and it's all of these things. But he was upset with those within the community that were tolerating this false teaching of Jezebel that was leading people into sexual immorality and into idol worship.
So what this says is there's certain things we can tolerate, which means we don't hate them and kill them and get rid of them because they just exist in the world. And yet there are some things that we encounter we should not tolerate. So that's where it takes true wisdom to know what are the things that's okay to tolerate and what are the things that we are to take authority over and drive out, because these are unacceptable for our personal lives or for the church itself or for society as a whole. We should drive certain things out. And that's where it takes true wisdom to know what are those things that are worthy of tolerance and what things are intolerable and should be done away with completely.
And the problem with the false teaching according to Jesus is that when we have false teachers in our midst that we do not correct and that we do not stop, then it leads other people astray.
Right.
And the problem with Jezebel is she was doing it in the name of God. And so I just think about our own culture. When you have pastors that are not speaking up for truth and that the reality of sin, sexual sin, and sexual sin we know goes through pornography, sex before marriage, living with boyfriends or girlfriends, the way we dress, homosexuality, transgenderism,
all the transgender stuff.
All of these things that now people are saying, oh, this is what it means to love, and Jesus has empathy. This would be, I think, what Jesus would call the false teaching, because what it actually, I think, is when we want to tolerate, it's actually not love of others, it's love of self, because we don't want to have that pressure that goes with following Jesus so closely. And so what Jesus then says is, he says, you need to repent. And he said, Jezebel's already had time to repent, but she's hard-hearted and she refuses. But he tells these believers, if you've not yet moved to the place of hard-heartedness and you can still repent, because judgment will be coming. And he says the judgment is steep. But then he tells the believers who've not tolerated the teaching. And what does it mean to not tolerate? It means they've spoken up and they've said, this isn't right. And this isn't the way we do things in the church. And he says to those believers, he said, you just hold on.
Hold on.
And then he says, after holding on, he says, I won't add anything else to you to burden you. Because the reality is, when we hold to the teachings of Jesus, we discover in this relationship with Jesus that the standards of Jesus are not burdensome. They're not a burden that he puts on our shoulders. Actually, we begin to live within this joy of knowing that God sets and establishes boundaries because of his love for us.
So what we can see here in the church of Thyatira is that it's a church in conflict with its job, the career society, social relationships, as well as spiritual overlay, as well as spiritual false teaching that's coming in and deceiving people about deep spiritual secrets. So how does the church respond in the midst of job, career decisions, social pressure, partying like the world, and then being told, hey, just do this and it's fine because it's a secret initiation rite, or it's not so bad, it's just private. So secret knowledge can be gained by doing these certain activities or having these certain potions or having these certain practices. It's okay because God's okay with those things.
And I remember years ago, there was a Christian that told me, she said, Leslie, you've just got to realize that's the world we live in. You've got to just do certain things. And I've thought about that a lot while standing at Thyatira, about, do we just have to do certain things? Do we have to fit into the world the same way? Or is there something so much deeper when we choose to say, Jesus is it, and I will love the things that are, the people that are around me, but I won't engage in it. And Jesus gives one final word to this church, those that are holding on and are going to be considered the overcomers. And he says, I will give you the bright morning star. Now, when we think of the bright morning star, we can think of a couple of things. One is there was a coin that had Apollos on it because he was the son of Zeus and he was considered the patron and he was the god that was worshipped here. We can also think about Venus, that she was considered the bright morning star, that she was considered with all authority. Or
on the governmental sense, Domitian's son had just passed away, and so he was being honored as the son, as a god himself, and so he was considered to be a god on the coin as well.
Or was Jesus saying something far deeper, the deeper things of God, where he is called the bright and morning star? Was Jesus saying, look, you hold on. You don't give in to the false teachers and you don't tolerate the false teachers. You continue on in the faith, the deeds, the good love, the perseverance, and I will give you the bright and morning star. I will give you more of myself. And that's what nice. Jesus says to the church of Thyatira. I'll give you more of myself if you will hold on to the truth of who I am.
Even if the coin coin information is true, even if the Domitian son information is true, the true message is the more we hold on to Jesus, the more of Jesus we have.
Which is pretty
That's
cool.
the eternal truth in the matter.
Yeah. So hold on to Jesus and get yourself more of the bright and morning star,
All right.
Jesus Christ.
God bless.